At the beginning of a new year, many of us make New Year resolutions. We have a board outside with resolutions for 2026. Have you noticed it? Quite good ones. Some of them are big, like that, and potentially life-changing, like those. Like this is the year when I join a housing project, when I get involved in big issues around the treaty, when I love wastefully. You've read them. But big or small, resolutions reflect the hope we have for the new year ahead of us. If we're lucky, we've survived those hopeful days of resolution making. We've survived them without feeling we failed before the year has even begun. Survived, as it were, that brief hopeful period when we were convinced that this will be the year when we become better people. Maybe better people through cutting out sugar, counting our steps maybe. We've shrunk our resolutions a bit. Colour coding our calendars, if we've never done that before. By now, most of us will have renegotiated those big hopeful ambitions into something more realistic, and even being kinder to ourselves, or not buying quite so many books we don't read. Today's gospel feels surprisingly appropriate for this moment, in the midst of that. John's gospel opens not with a miraculous birth story, there isn't one in John's gospel, but rather with a different beginning for Jesus. And this morning, a more realistic introduction to who John, the writer, hopes we will understand Jesus to be. John presents Jesus to us at the commencement of Jesus' work, with a series of introductions and actions, with people doing something, seeing, pointing, noticing, asking, and tentatively following. No big commitments, just curiosity and movement toward what happens next. After all, Epiphany, the liturgical season we are now in, is the season of revelation, the season of noticing, coming to know, the season of revealing, of unexpected insight and understanding, of seeing anew. John the Baptist sees Jesus and says, "Here's the Lamb of God." Now, that phrase can sound heavy at this time of year. Heavy with centuries of theology, probably enough theology to turn us right off. What matters most for us today is not the theology, however, that theology shaped by the church fathers beginning sometime after the 4th century or so, or the label that John attaches to Jesus, but rather the gesture. John points away from himself. He refuses to be the centre of attention. His role is to say, look over there. And he points away from himself. That's a good message for the church to hear as it sets out on another year. It reminds us that we're not here to draw attention to ourselves, to our traditions, to our certainty, or our moral superiority. We're here to point toward life, toward love, toward justice, toward the life-giving impetus that we glimpse in Jesus. We're here to point away from ourselves to the good news of God already at work in the world. Then, as John develops his story to tell us who Jesus is, we're told 2 of John's disciples do something very brave or very silly, depending on your perspective, but very human. They seem to have got caught up in something different. They got caught up in what Jesus was saying. Something about what Jesus was saying caught their attention or their imagination. And they leave what they know, having been followers of John, and begin to follow Jesus instead. When Jesus senses they're following him, he turns and asks them a question. I think that question sits at the heart of the Christian life. And I think that question relates to the impetus for making New Year resolutions. Do you know what the question is? Can you remember what Jesus asked? Jesus said, "What are you looking for?" What are you looking for? It's not, what do you believe? It's not, are you morally pure? It's not, do you have your theology sorted out? Just, what are you looking for? I think this is a very poignant question when we remember the context into which John was speaking in that last decade of the first century, when all was in turmoil in Jerusalem and the surrounding region, when there was bloodshed and despair, disowning and isolating, when it was difficult to hold on to hope in the face of it all. It was a great question for John to put before the Jesus followers, and for Jesus to ask, what were they hoping for? Were those Jesus followers expecting change? John asks the people he's writing at to. Were they expecting change? Perhaps they were even hoping for Jesus to return and make everything right. So, what are you looking for? Is a wonderful, gentle question for the start of a new year. It encourages us to look within and weigh up what it is that is really important for us. It doesn't lay any expectations or demand any allegiance. It just asks us to examine our inner thoughts and our hopes. The power of agency remains with us. We can determine what it is that will motivate us. We can determine what our values are. We can determine what is most important to us. It really is a great question at the beginning of a new year. After all, what are we actually seeking? What are we looking for? Peace? Meaning in our life? Healing? Belonging? Or is it a way to live that doesn't burn us out or harden our hearts? Is it perhaps a faith that makes room for doubt and still calls us toward justice? The disciples, annoyingly, I think, don't give an answer to Jesus' question. That could have been very helpful. Instead, they ask a question of him in return. They say, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" It's a very practical question, almost as if they were caught off guard and couldn't think of anything cleverer. And Jesus replies with one of the most open-ended invitations in the gospel. Come and see. Not come and sign up. Not come and I'll give you a job. Not come and agree with everything. Just come and see. At St. Matthew's here, we declare we're shaping a progressive theology. And progressive theology often begins right here, faith as invitation. Come and see. not coercion. Progressive theology is a journey, not instant certainty. It is curiosity, not fear. Jesus does not demand clarity from his disciples before their relationship can develop. Clarity grows through their relationship. And we can testify to that if we think about how we come to an understanding. And then something else happens that prefigures what happens today as we build relationships around our story of faith. Andrew, one of the two who, according to the writer of John's Gospel, first followed Jesus, goes and finds his brother Simon and says, "We found the Messiah." Notice he does not say, and notice what he does not say, and notice what he does not explain. He doesn't explain the doctrine of incarnation, or explain what the Lamb of God might mean, or do anything else. He doesn't outline a theory of atonement or talk about the virgin birth or any of those things. He simply brings Simon to see Jesus for himself. Growing the community of faithful around Jesus is, in this story, not about pressure or persuasion. It's relational. It's about seeing together something new, something different, something that brings hope, something you can work for. It's about sharing something that has already changed you, even if you can't quite explain how. Movements for positive social change are life-giving and function this way too. They're relational. Te Ohu Whakawhananga and the Living Wage movement are both movements of social change that this church is engaged with, and they're both aimed at addressing social injustice and enabling people to engage effectively in civil society. They are movements built on relationships, and they grow this way. Come and see, we might say. Come and see if this fits with the vision you have for our neighbours, for our country, for yourself. Come and see. When Simon does arrive, Jesus does something I think is a bit strange, yet on reflection is deeply affirming, if slightly unsettling. He gives him a new name. You're Simon. You will be called Cephas. It's not about erasing who Simon is, but it is about seeing who he might become, the rock upon whom the church is built. Seeing who Simon Peter might become. Epiphany is a season of revelation, not only about who Jesus is, but also about who we are becoming in relationship with Jesus and with each other. At the start of a new year, this matters. Many of us carry labels we've been given by family, by church, by society, by our own inner critics, and some of those names no longer fit. We hope to see beyond them, not with judgment, but with possibility. Our New Year resolutions reflect this, and we invite others to see beyond them too, to see what might be possible. So perhaps the invitation of this text is simple and spacious. Listen again for the question, what are you looking for? Trust an invitation that says, come and see. Share faith, not as certainty, but as relationship. And allow ourselves and one another to be named by hope rather than fear. Epiphany reminds us that God is still being revealed, not just in ancient stories, but in ordinary encounters, a conversation, a question, a small decision to follow what leads toward life, a contemporary psalm. May this be a year when we resist worrying that we don't have everything sorted and instead choose to stay curious. And when we paint ourselves as failures because we didn't fulfill our New Year resolutions or hopes, allow them instead to remind us from time to time what we hoped for. And may we, like John, point toward love and the life-giving move towards justice-making, rather than pointing to ourselves and the limits of our certainties. And may we hear again Jesus' invitation, gently, patiently, joyfully. Come and see.